Thank you. Yeah, fine. Let's do that. Understanding the addressing, the main challenges during the the functionality implementation time. Functionality, which teams are involving that mainly? Requirements that is given by the client and the developers and testers. They should focus mostly on the requirement side. Operation engineers, they don't need that much on the functionality of application. So there are the two things that is required. The requirements development and the testing team, they should know that. So the more on the functionality side. But what are the main activities that we're expecting overall the development team is? So they should implement the code, and whatever the code they are implementing, it should be integrated. Because here, if we just talk it, here we don't have only one developer. So maybe 10 developers or the 20 developers are working for the project. But at the end of the day, all the developers, the code, it has to be integrated without having any errors. So whatever the code I'm implementing or whatever the code you are implementing, suppose if you just talk it, we are the developers. So end of the day about your code and my code, it has to be integrated. Integration is one of the important challenge, not just implementation. Implementation, okay, understanding the functionality and implementing the program. But end of the day, it has to be integrated with the other teams modules also. This is one of the important activity, daily activity of the developer. And not only the code integration and code quality also, whatever the code he is implementing, he is following that all the standards or not, standards of the coding. And do you have any security vulnerabilities in the coding? So that is also required to verify it. So one line of the code he has modified or 100 lines he has implemented, but coding standards he is following it or not, that is required to verify it. That's we can say code quality checking, not only just functionality working it or not. The code which has been implemented, that code also required to verify it whether that is having the proper standards or not. That is another important activity. And implementing that unit test cases and functionality test cases from the development team, that is another activity. And running these test cases, if all the test cases are passed or not, they need to keep on checking about it. That thinking about it, we are talking that the functionality implementation, but implementation we didn't mention anywhere here. But what are the main activities is it is required to perform it? Code integration is the challenge. Code quality is checking is that another important activity, daily activity of the development team. And running that unit test cases or integration test cases, then that is another important activity. And as we are understanding that he should have the proper communication, understanding about that the requirement side, whatever he is implementing, it should be understand properly the functionality, and as that functionality wise he should implement it. So more communication we need to have it, that is another important. And he is doing all these activities. Let's assume that if he is going to do that all these activities manually, it takes a lot of time, right? Manually every day, suppose if I'm the developer, every day I don't know that how many lines of the code I will implement it and what is the functionality I will implement it. So that is we cannot say that maybe 200 times we will implement 200 times like as updating the code, or 300 or 400 or maybe 2 times. That is on the base of that like work which I'm having. If I'm the developer, during that implementation of the functionality and importance of the functionality point of view, I will work it on it. But a developer's point of view, just think it about it, these are all the important activities. But so these are all the challenges, right? The development team, so just note it, all these are problem statements. So end of the day, as a DevOps engineer, we need to provide the solutions. Teams are having the problems now during the release process, during that implementation time. Development team, testing team, and operation engineers, They have some communication gaps and some of their activities. As a DevOps engineer, we should understand their activities properly, and we need to help to them. But what we need to help it, that's will come back. But first understand the problem statements in the environment. Yeah, fine. So these are all some important activities from the development team we are understanding as a problem statements. So integration challenge, code quality checking challenge, running the test cases is the challenge, and understanding the requirements is a challenge. But if he's going to do this all these things with the manual activities, that is a big challenge. Every day working with that all these activities manually, one day we will get the frustration. That's like we will leave the project, right? As a developer point of view. Yeah, these are all some problem statements from the development team. Note it, problem statements. But finally, we will come back with the solutions. Next, testing team wise, just talk it that. So what are the problem statements that we have that from the testing team? What are the regular activities? What are the regular activities from this team? Yeah, so here if you just talk it, yeah, test cases implementation. Yes, we're understanding about the requirements. As per the requirements, positive cases, negative cases, they need to implement the test cases using the Selenium or whatever that like tool they are using about it. They need to implement the test cases and running those test cases. So quality checking. If the developer has done one line of the code and he has released the code, the testing team, if they have the 100 test cases, all the 100 test cases, they need to run it. They should not run it to only one test case. Okay, that is a pass. No, they should not accept like this. Any release is coming just from the development team is nothing but what are the test cases which are planned in the testing environment. So all the test cases that is required to run it and to evaluate it. So that is, yes, like keep on running about the test cases. That is another important activity. And if they are going to do this, the manual approach about this running the test cases, think it of it, a lot of effort that is required from the testing team. So one line of the code is released or like entire functionality is released, but they need to make sure about it. All the test cases are passed and the quality is expected as it is there in the product or not. This is the challenge to them. And they need to have the proper communication with the requirements also, understanding the requirements and implementing the test cases. The communication is required, better communication. Yeah, so these are all some challenges from the testing team. There are the problem statements. Yes, what is that? Test cases implementation, okay, leave it off it, that they need to work it. But running the test cases, each and every, the release point of view, each and every changes point of view, that is a big challenge. And understanding the functionality, that is another point. Yeah, these are all some challenges and problem statements from the development team and testing team. Then what about like operations engineers? So the challenges during the release process, which teams are involving that? Operation team. But what are the challenges? Yeah, so here the communication that is required, the development teams and testing teams and operation engineers. But already we are understanding the development teams, the problem statements, testing teams problem statements. Now let's understand it. Operation teams objectives. What are they? What are they are doing that daily activities? The operation teams point of view, yes, like the developers, what are the code they have implemented? It is required to release from the development environment to testing environment. And so once it is approved, testing environment to that UAT environment, and once it is approved UAT environment to that change, they need to move to that production environment. Yes, this is the release process. Deployment. So code deployment. Take the development servers and deploy to that staging servers. And once the staging servers deployed, then move that change to the UAT servers and UAT to the production. Like this continuous deployment, they will be having that. This is one of the important challenge for them. And not only that, the infrastructure, they need to manage it. Developers point of view, developers, they use the Windows systems. But in the production, as a security point of view, we use the Linux systems. But we should not see that the infra related challenges. So this is another important activity. How do we manage that infrastructure or the platforms which are required for that application? Before deploying that application, they need to make sure that the platform is ready and infra is ready. And another one is how fastly we deliver that change is also important. That is another important big factor in the DevOps. How fastly we deliver the change. This is the big challenge to them. Suppose if they have the overall some 70 servers. But to all the 70 servers, how do we release that change? So where we have the development servers next to the staging server, staging to the UAT to the production. So how fastly we deliver the change is also another important activity. And facing that, I mean, during that release, they are going to face the infra related issues. So let's think it of it. What is that like infra or platform related issues is? Suppose in the development environment, developer has used Java 1.8 Java version. But in the production, they are using about it Java 1.7. Developer has implemented the different version, but in the production, we have the different version of the platform. Then obviously, if you take it that 1.8 code and if you deploy this on the 1.7 server, definitely it is going to have the issues, right? Yeah, on the developer system, it is working. But whenever we take it, the change and release to the testing environment in the testing servers, it doesn't work it. Then who has to resolve it? Yeah, these are all some communication gaps between the teams. Developers, they are working on the Windows. But finally, the operation team, they are going to take that the change, whatever the developer has given, and we are deploying on the staging servers where the Linux systems. So infra is different because of that infra issues we are facing. If the issues are there, obviously it is going to have the impact on the delivery of the project. And communication gaps. Yes, we should have the proper communication between all the teams. If you have the gaps, then that is leading to that on-time delivery and on budget. Yeah, so these are all some points which we should understand. And if they are going to do that, all these things a manual process, that is a big headache. Yeah, so these are all the problem statements about the development teams, testing teams, and operation engineers. Is it clear about that? Now the problem statements. So development team activities, testing team the challenges, and operation teams the problem statements. So because of these problem statements, the projects are getting impacted. On-time delivery, we are not able to do that. The releasing of the product. Is it clear about that? So still we are in that understanding the problem statements itself, but how do we provide the solutions? That is, we need to come back. But solutions, how to provide it, that's next we are going to talk it. But if you understand these problem statements, then next you can understand easily. But if you are the new to that IT or the first time you are listening, that's all these keywords. Yes, some little bit understanding. Yes, that's that requires some patience. But once if you register it, so we will give it all these videos for about your reference. So once again, you can go ahead and you can review it and you can note it the points which are required. Yeah, so that is like daily you need to do that. If you know already these things, that's good. Easily you can grasp all these points. But if you're the new, or if you're the first time so listening about that, these the process models and the teams and environments in the one or two classes, that is not possible to get it entire project right. But yes, one or two times if you refer it, yeah, then we can understand it. Are you clear about these problem statements from the teams?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So, any queries, questions, please, and confirm that everyone. So, are you following that or not? In the chat window, just use the chat window and confirm that everyone is in active mode. Yes or no? Okay, good, good. Yeah, so be more interactive. Then about your attention will be there. But if you have the silent and just listening, definitely. So that's like the we are in that out of the sync. I mean, the sync is not going to happen. Yeah, so now we got it, the problem statements from the teams. But how do you provide the solutions for these problem statements? Yeah, so next, before understanding that, the problem statements, but to let's go for that. If you are getting, I mean, if you are expecting about it, great software, what are the key factors that's for it? Great software is nothing but better quality and on-time deliveries and on budgets. So if you're expecting all the things is nothing but, so some key factors we have. But one of the key factors that we're expecting is, yes, enhanced communication among the teams. That is very, very important. If you have the better coordination, communication, collaboration, then we can make it the successful of that project to delivery on time and on budget. So this is one of the key factor, communication. Another key factor is, so they are doing some regular activities, right? Code quality checking, test cases running, delivery or the deployment of applications, monitoring. If you just talk at these activities, the daily activities, if they are going to do the manual approach, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy that is required from the teams. But what we need to do this is, if you need to come up with that automation approaches, then definitely, so we can make it that the success rate of the project, we can increase it that. So manual activities identifying and converting into that automation approaches. This is another key factor of the great software delivery. And next one is fast delivery of the change to the production environment, that is to the end users. As we are talking that the once developer, he says that my code is ready or his change is ready, but you need to deliver to the testing environment and we need to run the testing servers, test cases, and test case are passed. Next, move to the UAT environment, deploy to the UAT servers and run the UAT test cases, and finally release to the production environment and run the production test cases. But in that entire process, let's assume that we have the 60 servers or the 70 servers or the 100 servers. But how do we deliver that change to the number of servers? Because we are not going to have only one server or one system, different environments, different servers. But if the developer he says my code is ready, if you are able to deliver that one to that within minutes with all that deployments and the testing activities, then we get that the faster feedbacks from the client and we can make that the faster delivery of the changes. Fast delivery, this is very important. How fastly we deliver the software to the end user. Once the client comes with his functionality, and once the functionality is ready from the development, how fastly we give it to the end user. This is these days competitive world. Suppose if you just talk it, especially e-commerce application, daily new services which are coming, that not only in the e-commerce, banking domain, insurance domain, education domain, healthcare domain, telecom domain, any industry, if you just take it, who is coming up with that the better services, understanding that the client requirements and coming up with the new services, how fastly they are bringing to the end user, then definitely that vendor is the king in the market, right? Yeah, so like once functionality is ready, how fastly that's we deliver with better quality to the production environment. That is the major key factor, another important key factor. And to overcome that infra related issues, as we are talking, that developers, they are working on that Windows systems, but production we are using that Linux systems. So because of these different environments, sometimes we are going to face the issues. But how do we handle these issues? So we should have that development and production infrastructure, both should be the same. But how do we define it? That means developer, what all the test cases they are running, that make sure they are running that on the Linux based systems instead of the Windows. Then if it works on the Linux system, definitely it is going to work it on the production servers, right? Then we don't see any issues. So this is another important factor. Make sure about it. Developers, whatever the environment they are using, that is equal to the production. Then infra related issues, we can overcome that during the release process. And we should get that quick feedback from the clients. Yeah, so these are all some important key factors to make it that successful journey of the projects, on time delivery and on budget. But whatever we are talking, that's so these key factors, that is enhanced communication. Do you have that enhanced communication between that, like requirements and the developers and testers in the waterfall approach? No, as we are talking that the client is client is involving initially, and he is going to run his test cases before releasing. Yesterday we were talking that's one of the problem in the waterfall approach. Client is not part in the process. Then how do you get it the better communication between all these teams during that implementation time? Yeah, how do we have it enhanced communication between the client who gives the requirements, client, right? Requirements, understanding, and developers and testers, we need to have the better communication. But how do you do that? How do you get it? How do you do that automation approaches during that development teams, whatever the activity they are doing, and testing teams, whatever the activities they are doing, that we need to come up with that automation approaches instead of the manual. But how do you come up with that? Yeah, so in this context, what is the methodology that's the management team they are using, that the latest is in the projects, that is Agile. Agile is one of the process model, but we have the different process models, but mostly we hear about that Agile with the different methodologies we have. But yes, like how do you get it the client itself in the process model interacting more with the development teams and testing team? That is one important issue in the waterfall. Second one is in the waterfall approach, long duration of the projects, as we are talking that here. So these are all going to have the long duration of the projects, and the client is involving only in the requirements and before releasing to the production. So there is no better communication with the client. and there is no fast delivery in this process model. So to introduce or to overcome these problems, what is the methodology now they are using in the projects is Agile. So Agile is helping that to have that enhanced communication between the clients, development and testing team, and as well as it is supporting that instead of having the long duration of the project, short and small durations. So what is this? Let's move into that Agile model. So we are not going to work it, the mostly designing of the Agile, but we should know that the process model of the Agile. This is especially which team we are working that, requirements and development and testing team. Here there is no operation engineer. So operation engineers indirectly they are working here, but yes, directly they are not involving in the Agile model. So this is especially clients to bring into the model, and as well as instead of having the longer durations with the short durations, the continue with the project, the products. Yes, this is the model of the diagram. So here we don't say that in the Agile model requirements, in that like waterfall approach we are talking that requirements, right? But here we don't say that's requirements, we call it as a product backlogs or user stories. So entire product backlogs that will be split as small modules. Suppose Gmail application. So they are starting about it as a product to implement it. Let's assume that. That's the application. But that application is having the sign up functionality, sign in functionality. And once you sign in, we have that inbox functionality, spam functionality, trash functionality, settings. Different we have that, different functionalities we have. But entire product they start it and they go for that in the one release process. So what do they do? That is that entire product they will split into small modules. Which module is a high priority and how many days that is required, what is the team that is required. So initially which will be having that is sprint planning sessions. Sprint planning. So that is Agile teams comes into the picture and they discuss with the client, boss, let me know that about your priority of that, the modules which are required to deliver it, and they decide about it, the iteration. But iteration they don't go further beyond this. So if the sign in and sign up module is decided, so they go for that. It's the short duration, not like as a months. But on the base of the module, number of teams or number of developers, how many number of developers that is required to implement that module. Front end modules, back end modules. They split it and they come up with the plan. So that plan which comes into that one sprint. Sprint is like as an iteration. Small iteration, that is 2 weeks. The sprints are 3 week sprints or the 4 weeks sprints. That's we'll be having that in the process model. But we are not going to decide it. So which module, how many that's like weeks that is required, that is Agile team. So they come up with that. And in the planning session, they identify about it, which module is required to take it priority and what is the time duration that is required. And they split into thus multiple sprints, entire product related modules or the user stories. Suppose one sprint they have come up with that with one module and they plan it about like a 2 to 4 weeks on the base of the time required. And in these 2 to 4 weeks, everyday meetings they will be having that. So this is the enhanced communication about the requirements teams, development teams, and the testing teams. Everyday meetings. That's we will call it as Scrum meetings. So development teams and testing teams and client side. So all the teams they join discussing about it. So what it has been done and any inputs that is required to go for this next enhancement. So everyday checking the functionality, how they are implementing. and all the test cases are fulfilling that to bring that the better quality or not. Everyday review definitely that makes that more communication, right? So this is, I mean, the agile model, one of that like which is helping enhanced communication among that like a requirements understanding from the client and with the development and testing team. So they go for that like having that the long duration of the project releases. So short duration, that is planning on the base of the module 2 to 4 weeks. They split into that entire product into small modules, and they go for that multiple sprints, and each sprint with a specific duration with a short iteration. And in that iteration also everyday meetings with that all the teams together, and they go for that releasing that small user stories, and end of the day, yeah, potentially shippable product increment. Yes, incrementing module, end of the day the entire product, right? End of that, like, I mean, the specific duration, that's 6 months or the 1 year of that project which is planned. So this is that the process model they are using this in the current market to have it enhanced communication among the team, that is during that implementation or during the running the or implementing the test cases. Yeah, agile, which we can say the short iterations. So each iteration we'll call it as a sprint. So some important keywords: product backlogs, and the product backlog which will be they're divided into multiple sprints, which each backlog which is going to have the 2 to 4 weeks of it. And every day scrum meetings, all the teams together they join it and they understand about that the current requirement or any inputs or verifying about it the current status. And finally the completing that iteration. So small iteration, that means small sprints, parallel sprints, finally the product release. So short iterations, yes, vision it, that is a plan. And after that, yes, iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3. So like that multiple iterations they come up with that, but it is not sequentially, the parallelly. Some developers are working on the iteration 1, some developers are working that iteration 2 at the same time. And finally, so the number of iterations finally launching the product. But in each iteration, what we are expecting about it, what are the activities? Okay, one of the activities, meetings, obviously. But what are the other activities? So Agile, each iteration, if you just talk it that, here we have this the planning models. Yes, first plan it, which we use a story that is required to implement it, required with coding implementation of it. And then they need to do the build operation. I will talk it this later, what is a build and all that. So developers, they need to implement the code and they need to do the build activity, that is converting this code into that artifactories or binary files. Directly code we cannot deploy to the server. So in the real-time process, directly we don't deploy the code to the servers. So this code should be converted into that binary files. Binary files, that is yeah, if you just talk it, Windows software which are the .exe file, that is a binary file. GIF files, that is also binary file which is packaged, or bin file or MSA file. Yeah, on the basis of the technology of this code, we need to convert into that binary file. That's build process, we'll call it. This is I mean, there's a big concept we have. We'll come back to that. Then we need to go for the running the test cases, unit test cases, and which are planned like pre-deployment test cases, post-deployment test cases. Yeah, these are all the pre-deployment test cases. Then go for deploying to the servers, and after deploying again run the test cases and run the test cases and review of it. As expected it is working, then it is okay, or if something is wrong, then do the change and do that this iteration. So this is the continuous process. So the number of iterations are going on is nothing but in each iteration, these are all the internal activities of the iteration. So whatever they have planned in that iteration, so understand this, take the requirements and the design it and code it, build it, and do that pre-deployment test cases, and then release to the staging servers, and then do that the release with the deployment of the servers, then run the test cases. That means all the test cases are passed or not, review about it here, and if everything is okay, then that iteration as expected it is working, or otherwise just again do that the modification and do this iteration. This is not just a one-time activity, this is the continuous activity. But which teams are the mostly involving here? So which teams are going to involve here in this agile process model? Agile has come up that especially for development and testing teams with the client interaction. Is it clear about that? The agile model? But it is not completed. Okay, let me continue 2 or 3 slides, then we will conclude about this agile process model. Yeah, so agile, they are coming up with that. They are not using waterfall now. Waterfall, we have some disadvantages. Client is not in the part of the process and a longer duration. That is the main disadvantages. But those disadvantages, what do we have in the waterfall? They have come up with that, bringing that into the process model, that is agile. The disadvantages, whatever we have in the waterfall, now that is advantages in the agile process. That is, client is part in the process, everyday meetings with the client, and short duration of the process. It is not like as a monthly based, it is weekly based on the base of the module which they are working at. But if you have one iteration, is nothing but in that iteration, just thinking about it, these are all the activities that we have: implementing the code and code integration and build it and run the test cases and do the deployment and run the test cases. If all are okay, that's fine, or otherwise do the iteration once again. Yeah, waterfall approach, design it, the spec come up with that, and then code and do that UAT, and in the UAT something is wrong, then go back to that design and come back all these phases, and finally launch that product to the end user or to the customer. But in the agile process, so user stories, that is the product backlogs, the small units of the work, which will be converted as a sprint. Sprint is iteration. The sprint entire it is having implementing the code, build the code, run the test cases, release it to the testing servers, and do that evaluation. And if it is okay, that's fine. Otherwise, review it. So sprint it, I mean iterations, like small iterations, and launch it. Once the iteration is complete, yes, the release it. Small units of the work, we are releasing that instead of entire project or product releasing. Yeah, multiple sprints are going on. But finally, after observing this agile approach, so if you just observe some statistics, 459% better than the traditional methodology. So traditional waterfall methodology, if you compare with that with agile, agile is giving that 459% better. 459, not just like 100 or 200 or 300. So these are all like comparison, cost wise, schedule wise, productive wise, quality wise, satisfaction wise. So we are getting that so many benefits by introducing or by using about agile methodology. Then management team, they go for that waterfall approach or agile approach. Which one do they prefer it now?
Agile.
Yes, obviously Agile, right? Because there is more benefit on the cost side, scheduling of that, the activities or the planning about the modules or the user stories, and the productivity point of view, yes, better quality and satisfaction from the customers. If you just that, Agile is giving that the 459% better than the traditional methodologies. But by introducing this Agile, we have some challenges among that testing teams and the development teams. Because small iterations, every 2 weeks the challenge, every 3 weeks there's some challenge. You need to release it. But lot of stress on the teams, right? Yeah, Agile is helping that management team. They are getting the better productivity, cost wise and customer satisfaction wise, because every day the customer is involving. Just have the meetings. Yes, management team they are enjoying that. But what about the team who are involving in the process? Implementing the code and doing the build activities and running the test cases and verifying about it. Yes, that's if it is successful, releasing to the staging servers, then yeah, that is deploying to the servers and again run that all the test cases and review that. And if all are okay, that's fine. That's launch it to the customers, or otherwise again iterated this process. So lot of stress. The team who are working that every day he should communicate with the client, the development teams and testing teams, what they are doing that. So this is something the challenge to the teams who are involving in the process model. Yeah, management team they are getting the better result if you compare with that waterfall approach, on time delivery, on budget. Yes, that team they are getting the better benefit. But here some challenge on the agile process. Yes, in the agile process, what are the main activities that we are expecting is, so one of the important activities is continuous integration. Yes, so integrating the code among the development team and build it and run the test cases. Continuous integration is one thing and continuous testing is another important thing. So daily working with that, these are all the continuous activity. Integration of the code and the testing of the code. So there are the two important activities that we are expecting that with the agile process model among the development team, which we need to think it automation of this one. If you are able to automate it, then the developers and testing team they get the relax. But if they are doing that this life cycle every day and every minute with the manual approach, then that is some challenge. So a headache thing, manual approach. I mean, every time you need to be more cautious. But if you're able to automate it, and if you do that, the continuous integration, continuous testing activities, if you automate it, then they can concentrate on that. They're implementing the code, right? The functionality side, they will concentrate it. Then we can reduce some stress to them. So this is one important thing, continuous integration and continuous testing with agile process model. Yeah, finally, if you conclude that agile model, it is helping that enhanced communication between the requirements and development and testing team. But with this enhanced communication, we have thus some life cycle process model that is about continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. Are you clear about these points?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. But still, if you see that during the release process, that means that teams, which teams are involved in that? Development teams and testing teams and IT operation engineers. What about this team's involvement? This is the release process. Okay, until that implementing the code, we have the better communication with all the team. Yeah, please mute the mic. Yeah, so with the agile process model, we are expecting about it is the better communication between these three teams. But what about these three teams? That is, once developer he says that my code is ready, how do you go ahead like with release process to the testing servers and testing teams or running about their test cases, then releasing to that like UAT environment and running that UAT test cases, and finally to the production environment releasing that. So these are all the important things. But here also we have some communication gaps, right? Infra related issues, platform related issues, how fastly we deliver the changes. These are all some challenges here. So how do you overcome those challenges? That is coming up with the DevOps process model. So DevOps is not the tool. We are not going to learn the DevOps tool. We are learning that one of the process model. Process models never ends. Maybe the tools which are coming into the market, maybe like 2 years or 3 years, the tool will be there, and after that, new tools which we should know it. But DevOps we are learning is nothing but that is the process we are learning that. So in that process, what all the teams they are working that, and what all that, I mean, the teams related challenges that we have, or the problem statements we have, those problem statements, solutions we are providing that. Thinking about your role, the importance about our DevOps engineer. Yeah, so DevOps, that's like why the DevOps is, yes, it helps about it, the bringing that teams together. That is the main objective. The communication gaps, whatever we have during the release process. But during the requirements phase, that is agile. But in that agile, we have that iteration process models. That is release process we have. But during the release, how do we handle that? The problem statements. How do you reduce the stress among the development teams or among that these teams? That is DevOps coming into the picture. So DevOps, if you just talk it, that is that is coordination of the development teams and testing teams and operations engineers. So here, how do we get it like better? The coordination is, yes, how do we have that enhanced communication between all the teams, and what are the automation approaches that we need to bring it during the release process, and how fastly we deliver the changes to that live environment, and how do we make sure about it infrastructures are the same to overcome that infra related issues, development, testing, UAT, production, all the environment that should be same, and how do you get it that quick feedback of that the changes which you are doing that. Yeah, these are all some objectives of that during the release process. So all these problems related solution, what do we have thus? That is from DevOps. So what are the main principles that we are trying to understand from the DevOps if we just conclude it? The main principles. Yeah, these things which we should remember it whenever we are learning that any tool. If you are learning that infra, you are learning that platform, or if you are learning that application side, we should remember these principles as a DevOps engineer. But what are those principles? Is we need to make sure that development and test environments is similar to the production. Yeah, if that's a production environment, if you are using that something Ubuntu based systems, make sure that developers they are running the test cases on the Ubuntu system itself. Then we can overcome that infra related issues. This is one principle. Another principle, what is the solution we need to provide it is release process. We need to keep on deploy that application, right? Development to the testing servers, testing to the UAT servers to the production servers. So that is a continuous deployment to all the environments, continuous deployment, continuous integration, continuous testing. You see that some principles or some objectives we are getting that. And not only that, there's continuous deployment, validate operation quality. There is a continuous testing and continuous monitoring. Yes, servers, once it is up and running in the production, we need to monitor it, right? They're all working successfully or not. And what is the health of those servers? What is the load on those servers? Suppose recently AHA server got failed. Because of that, some unexpected load. They didn't expect that much load, and their server's capacity is very less, but suddenly that high load, and because of the high load, servers were crashed. So that is, they need to keep on, I mean, we need to keep on monitoring about the load on the servers, how the performance is having that. So that is a continuous monitoring activities, continuous performance and tuning activities, continuous troubleshooting activities. So if you finally conclude that some important operations, continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous deployment or delivery, continuous monitoring, and make sure about it all the infras are the same. So these are all some important principles which we should know as a DevOps engineer. Which technology are you working, doesn't matter that. Are you working for the Java or .NET or PHP or Python, doesn't matter that. But these are all about our principles which we should know it. But how do you do that? So how do you set up the similar environments, and how do you manage it about it? Continuous delivery or the deployment of that application to the number of systems, number of servers. That is, we are going to talk it about that, the DevOps. Is it clear about that? Are you following all these points? Yeah, so these are all the lengthy things understanding, but in the single day that is not at all possible to get it all these points. But all these things we are going to talk it practically. So continuous integration activities, continuous delivery or the deployment activities. Finally, 5 keywords which we should remember it: integration, testing, delivery or deployment, and finally monitoring. So continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous monitoring, continuous delivery or the deployment. So these are all important principles to the DevOps engineer. Yes, we are going to join that as a DevOps engineer is nothing but these points that is required for us. So we are going to coordinate it and collaborate all the teams who are working in the process. That is development teams, testing teams, and operation teams. And we are going to work like as a developer and operation engineer. See, a lot of, the demand, right? So you are not going to work on the functionality side, or you are not going to work it on that, the particular, the testing side. And we are not specific to the particular technology, that is Java or .NET or PHP. So whatever that application, doesn't matter that. So if you are going to join to the particular project, in that project, what all the teams are involving, that all the teams coordination and bringing that automation approaches and bringing that the better, yes, like a fast delivery approaches. These things we are going to work with them. Are you clear about these points? So are you following the points, everyone? Yeah, any queries, questions, please? So quickly, can you give that? Like, I mean, sorry, following that, have you understood the point, especially finally, the agile process model and DevOps process model. So that like a waterfall approach, what are the disadvantages we have? Those disadvantages to overcome that, agile has come up with that. But in that agile process, we have some challenges. Those challenges among the teams, the automation approaches point of view, enhanced communication point of view, and as well as the fast delivery of that, the changes point of view, DevOps has been introduced. DevOps is another process model which is helping that in the process. This is not the tool. DevOps is not the tool, but DevOps, whenever we are implementing, we have so many tools together to use it that. How to get it the better enhanced communication among the development teams? How to give that automation approach to the development teams? How to give that automation approach to the testing teams? How to give that automation approaches to the operation teams? That is we are going to work it. Those problem statements, we are going to take it and we are going to work with that. Really interesting, right? That means we should know developers related activities. We should know that operation related like OS activities, networking activities, infrastructure, that is the servers management, and we should know that the platforms management. Yeah, multi skill set. Now the current market, they are looking about it, the multi skill set, the engineers. If we say that I am that like only the particular administrator, no, so we don't have the demand in the current market. If you are expecting the better career growth and as well as the better package management and all these, yes. So the current, why the suddenly the before they were not using this DevOps as a separate role. Operation engineer is doing that, but now it has been split it to have that enhanced communication among that development teams and testing teams and operation engineers. They brought it the separate role into the project. That is DevOps. So we are going to learn it, the writing that infrastructure as a code, or we are going to learn it platform as a code. We are going to learn it application, how do you distribute to that. If you have the 10 servers or the 100 servers or the 1000 servers, within that minutes. So we have the problem statements, solutions as well as. But what are those solutions? Solutions are nothing but the tools we are going to use it. We are not going to do them manually. We are going to take the some tools, and with that tools we are going to configure that continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous testing, continuous monitoring. But what are the tools are available to perform all these activities? That is, I need that the one more 1 hour of the time, and we will conclude about that. What is the continuous integration? In that continuous integration, what are the tools we are going to talk at that? What is the continuous delivery or the deployment, and what are the tools that we are going to use it? What is the continuous monitoring or continuous testing? What are the tools that we are going to use it? So that is the final conclusion. So we are not going to do that manually. We are learning some tools to get it the better coordination communication of the teams who are working in the projects. See the beauty of the role. Whatever the relation doesn't matter for us, right? If you are involving in each layer or each team's interaction, so these teams that is required, because we are saving that lot. I mean, we are bringing that better productivity of the process. We are giving the solutions on the process model, whether that is mobile application which is using that Android, or whether that is gaming application which is using some XYZ software, or that is something website application which they are using the Java or .NET, doesn't matter for us. If the project is there, is nothing but DevOps engineer is required, as simple as it is. Are you getting my points? And we will conclude about it, how the Rise and Shine is helping in this journey. After understanding continuous integration, delivery, deployment, monitoring, and testing. These 5 keywords we need to remember it. Anyone is asking about it, what you are doing that as a DevOps engineer. Yes, we are helping in the coordinating with the teams, that is development and testing teams, and with operations by implementing continuous integration, process model, continuous delivery or the deployment and monitoring and testing. So this is the kind of the role. But Agile is there. Agile, yes, that is the helping about it requirements and development and testing team. But Agile process model, continuous integration is important. But what is this continuous integration? What are the tools? And what is the continuous delivery or the deployment? What are the tools? And what about that microservice product, monolithic applications? So which tools we are going to talk it? And how do we make it about our resume as a better to compete in the current market? So that is we are going to talk it. We will conclude it tomorrow.